Burgess here with Music Marketing TV, and today we're going to be talking about the matrix. The matrix, one of those things that you have to understand if you want to use this synthesizer in any sort of a proficient way. You can use presets and get away with a lot of stuff, but knowing how the matrix works is going to open up flexibility, and it's a bit scary for people who are new to synthesis. So let's go ahead, let's tear down some of those fears. The manual's still in the works in some respects, and so a lot of the matrix stuff has not been like completely explained in there. And also, I briefly really quick want to mention what these two buttons do, because they're also not in the manual in its current state. Maybe they are now, but I have discovered what these buttons do, and I noticed it when I saw over here we had an L to R and an L to R. You can load patches individually on the panels. So I can come into my patches, or the patches that came with it, and go in and say, oh, load this on the left or right panel. So it's been loaded up on the left, and I could take the left panel and import it to the right, and it clones it. That is like the coolest thing ever, that you can load patches individually and move them around to the different panels. That blew my mind. I was like, holy snap, that's cool. Okay, so now I just wanted to show you what that did, because that was sort of like a whoa to me. That makes so much sense. But anyways, let's go in, and they have some default initialization patches they recommend you start from. So we're going to start from the init to oscillator left. So this is initialization to oscillator on your left panel. And this panel is clear, and I want to start from a clear slate so I can show you how things work fundamentally and going from there. So it's just a bunch of really clear examples to get you started. So I'm going to import left to right, and it clears this handy dandy thing. And also our trigger panel is also clear. So the first thing we're going to set up is, if we click here, I'm going to set it up so that the keyboard gate, when I push a key and let go of a key, that information goes to our trapezoid left and right envelopes. So we see here we have our trapezoid envelopes, and this is the only internal connection in the synthesizer. So I'm going to change these to ADSRs and bring the releases way down because they need to be lower. And I'm going to bring these signals way up because the trapezoid signal level has dominion over the ADSR. So if this is low, you won't hear anything. You have to have this up to hear the ADSR. So just so you know, that's the rule. Something that confused me at first was there are two envelopes in here, and due to the state that the manual has not been totally done yet, and I can email the developer. Like, they actually emailed me and said, if you have any questions, you can email me. But I love a good puzzle. So these envelopes actually go to over here. There's actually some additional envelopes over here that you can use. That's what those go to. So do not be confused. These do not trigger this envelope. And that envelope is indeed listed in our matrix over here. Anyways, all you need to do right now is make sure you have turned those things on. We have our gate on. And all that means is that when we push a key, it will send signals to tell things to activate. Now, we haven't routed anything in our matrix yet, so we got to go to our matrix to do this. So we come in, we open up our matrix, and we say, all right, let's do the simplest of simple tasks. Let's just get the oscillators so we can hear them. So oscillator 1, here it is. I want to hear oscillator 1. We can see we can actually grab the individual outputs, which was kind of novel to me. Normally not an option. You have to pick one or the other, but here you can put them out at the same time. And so we see we actually have control over the individual levels of each one of these outputs. And so I'm going to send the sine wave, and out commonly means speakers. So I'm going to send it out my speakers, and we can hear it. We did this in the last patch. Wasn't that mind-blowing? We even talked about how this output is controlled by this level. So if I hook this up, and that's why it's also centered, because they each have their own panning controls. So pretty handy thing to know. And so we can output each one of our waveforms. Oscillator 3 is lower. And the reason oscillator 3 is lower is that in traditional synthesis, or I don't know if we call it traditional, but old synthesis, the third oscillator was used also as a control signal very commonly. Control signals are much more useful if they're lower in frequency content. Or lower in frequency. The frequency content, it depends on the waveform. If you come into the extended panel, you can actually see oscillator 3 appears as an option. Pretty handy. So, okay, so those are our oscillators. That's how you hear them. We see here we have this meter. You might be going, what is this meter? Well, if you send something to the meter, but look at this. It shows up. There's the meter. It's getting our sine wave and telling you how loud it is. This meter is mostly cosmetic to me. There are some pretty nifty times where I've been able to verify whether or not a signal is going where I thought it was going using the meter. So it does have some functional purposes as well. So pretty handy dandy. So you can send, like, let's just send a bunch of stuff to the meter, right? And there it is. We've maxed out our meter. Oh no. Actually, I haven't tested to tell if this will like tell us if we're internally clipping or not. I bet it does, which also would be a pretty handy dandy feature. But anyways, that's the oscillators, that's the meter. Let's move right along. Let's send an oscillator to an envelope. So we're going in and we're going out. So we're coming, let's send the sine wave to the envelope. So here it is. We've sent it to the envelope, to this specific envelope. And I've changed it from envelope shaper to ADSR because ADSR is a little bit more straightforward. And that whole deal about the trapezoid I already mentioned. And so we want to hear this. And so we say, well, geez, if we want to hear the envelope, well, how do we hear that? Well, there's this envelope signal option down here, and we can send that out. So if we send that out, when we play notes, because we hooked up our trigger so that when we push our keyboard, it'll send a trigger, and that will tell the envelope to turn on. When we do that, the envelope signal will happen. And you might be going, how do we send it to this specifically? Like, how do we know that? Well, if we look in our trigger, we sent it to trapezoid left panel. So the trapezoid left panel will be activated. And if we look, we've set it to our ADSR. And so our ADSR will then be activated. And so we can hear it working. So we took the envelope signal out and now we can hear it working. Great. There's a couple problems though, you may have noticed. First problem is when I play a note, it's the same note every single time. So we already addressed this in the last video, but let's go ahead and do it one more time. We'll go to extended, the plus icon, and we have our keyboard options. I'm gonna use keyboard 1, and I'm gonna set that to control the frequency of our 3 oscillators. So now when I play a note, now we hear this random clicks and pops. That's our envelope triggering when I push a new note according to our priority. I don't want to deal with mono right now though. So I'm going to turn on reset poly. Polyphonic modes allow us to play multiple notes. Now we hear this sort of like pitch bend thing. I don't want that. That's called portamento. I'm going to turn that off for now. And I'm also going to bring my decay up so I don't get such a clicky attack. That's better. I like that more. Okay, cool. So there we have it. We have obtained a basic functioning patch, and we've used our envelope. And so this is our envelope signal. This is going to be a really common patch. So I recommend you unpatch this and really quick patch it again, and just make sure you understand every step and turn everything off. Just make sure you're good up to here. Because I'm going to move right along here. And the next thing I'm going to do is instead of sending the envelope signal out, I'm going to send it to the ring modulator. Actually, let me just send signal directly to the ring modulator to be as simple as possible. So I have my sine wave. It sounds like this. Or it doesn't sound like that. Oh, okay. This brings up a good point. I discovered this on accident. Again, something that could possibly be added to the manual. When you play a note, we had our envelope hooked up. So it's waiting for a trigger to trigger our note. So our oscillator isn't constantly generating noise right now. It usually is, but it received a command to turn off last. So I have to hit a note and it will start generating noise again. And oh, it stopped right there. You're not supposed to do that. So I just discovered something new. I keep discovering things. Every time I think something's so straightforward, I find something new. Reset poly will only hold a note. It forces you to have an envelope, like a set one, unless you activate an envelope on purpose. But if you go to mono, it rings out. So now you know. I didn't know that. These are exciting discoveries. So let's go ahead and moving right along. We can hear it coming out. I'm going to stick to mono for this. And now what we have here is we say, okay, we're going to send it to the ring modulator. Now, if you're familiar with ring modulation at all, This ring modulator is a little different. So you notice it's not labeled carrier or modulator. And at first I thought this was somewhat strange. I was like, why isn't it labeled carrier or modulator? So this particular ring modulator, for now, we're just gonna chalk it up to a waveform timbre changing mechanism. That's it. That's how most people view ring modulators anyway in the first place. So we're not gonna sweat about the details of how this thing works. We're just gonna use it. So if I put something in B, we have our ring modulator, and we see here we have our ring mod out. So I'm gonna send that out 1. We don't hear anything. That's because the ring modulator must have 2 signals to be hearable. So we can hear our ring modulator. It's really soft. The reason it's so soft is there's a ring modulator level. Let's just pump that up. That's gonna be not so soft anymore. Now, ring modulation, at first you're like, this sounds like a sine wave. It's not that exciting. Let's go to Oscillator 2, because I want separate pitch controls. And ring modulation works on a ratio principle. So when one sound has a different pitch than another, it sets up a ratio and it creates these side bands. And that can make a sound cool. That's what we're gonna chalk it up to right now. So I'm gonna use a square wave. And right now, nothing exciting because the ratio is 1 to 1. But let's go ahead and change that by changing the pitch. Okay, so the reason I choose not to dive into specifically why it's called A and B and not C and M is because usually carrier modulator, if you flip those, you get some pretty specific results. Here, if we flip these, so let me make this one B and this one A. There's no difference. So this is sort of a unique ring modulator. Really, really interesting. You must have signal in both, so it works on some sort of a comparing principle. But anyways, you get the idea. We can route things into the ring modulator and stuff comes out. So that's pretty cool. Really handy way for making a lot of cool textures. Like if we took a saw wave and instead fed it the square wave again. And then let's change. One thing I was having a good time with the other day was using the sine wave and this square wave, since this one's an octave lower by default. You can just, and if we start combining it with additional techniques, you can get really crazy pretty fast. But some pretty cool sounds can come out of the ring modulator. So let's go ahead, let's hop on back to our matrix. So now you get the idea. We send things in, they come out. And if we only want to hear the sound, let's incorporate the envelope into this, right? So let's say, oh, I want to take the ring modulator. I want to do a sine wave against a triangle wave. That could be kind of cool. And I want to activate the ring modulator through an envelope. So I'll take the ring modulator, patch it into the envelope, and then I'll take the envelope and I'll patch that out. Now, when I play a note, we get nothing. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, let's see what we got going on here. Why do we get nothing? It's because I turned our signal down earlier in an effort to troubleshoot. So let's turn that back up. And we're good to go. We're very, very soft. Let's bring the sustain way up. And let's also dial up one of the outputs. Let's bring one down an octave and bring this. So some basic waveforms right now, but we're getting some pretty interesting things. So moving right along here, let's reset these things. Control click to reset values. Now we've incorporated the envelope, and you've also seen that when something goes wrong, you can sort of determine where it went wrong. Let's go through the reverb and the filter, and I'll probably save the controls for another day just because this is kind of a longer video, but hopefully you're beginning to get the idea. So let's go ahead, let's turn the ring mod off, and let's take the envelope signal out. Let's just turn everything off. And let's just say we want to do some reverberation. Why is my mouse spinning? So we have some reverb here. This is a reference to this module, not this one. So this reverb is like at the end of our signal chain. This one's built right into the matrix. So let's go ahead, let's do that. I want to put it through an envelope just so we can get a good clear listen of what the reverb's doing. So let's take our sine wave. Actually, let's use the saw wave for this. So we'll take the envelope to the saw wave, and then we'll take the envelope signal out and send that to the reverb. So you can see it's actually pretty intuitive once you kind of know where things are going. So now the reverb's coming, and now we want to hear the reverb. And so we've got a reverb right there. So it makes sense. So this is our input. So we take our reverb and we send that out. And so now we can hear our reverb doing its thing. Let's bring this way up. Let's actually just double up on outputs. Cool. And so we can hear it. We'll bring our reverb level up. Woo-hoo. And here I'm going to switch back to reset poly. So that's our first one. Now, of course, we can dial it in. So let's just say, oh, I don't want to hear, let's say that you want to do a wet dry kind of thing. Well, we can come in and we can take our reverb signal in, dial back. Let's actually just use one output for this because that's already pretty dang loud. So now we can do a sort of a wet dry thing. So we're going to balance the signal directly out from the envelope. So that would be just our saw wave going through the envelope. And we're balancing it with this the signal coming through the reverb. And remember, we sent the envelope signal through the reverb. So this is basically like after the reverb now. So we could do that as well. I'm going to leave the reverb on, and just so we can hear the different effects. So that's reverb 2. Here's reverb 1. We also have a mix knob here. Let's set that to 100%. And now we'll go down to 2. A much brighter verb in 3. So you get the idea. We can send stuff to the reverb, and a very similar tune is sung by the filter. So let's go over here. We've got a filter. We'll send signal to the filter. And then we will take the filter out. Let's actually take the envelope, send that to the filter. And then the filter we will take out. So we see here we have a filter. And let's just send that out. We'll just do one output. And there's our sound. We have a filter up here. So the filter up here is kind of an interesting filter. This is labeled response, but it's actually a resonance control. You can actually hear it come up, and the filters can self-oscillate. So that just means that it creates a feedback loop within the filter, and that can sometimes be desirable. So if we really drive it hard with the resonance, we can get it to self-oscillate here. Let's go up to a higher order. So there you have it. We learned last time reset poly stops the infinite oscillations. This is this interesting problem. I wonder if circular poly. Nope, doesn't like polyphonic. Okay, we'll go back to mono. There you go. So they self-oscillate. And you might be wondering, how does this happen? Well, there's a noise floor in synthesizers. And if the resonance is high enough, it'll pick up the noise floor and that small oscillation and just amplify it. So they're mimicking that here. So that's pretty cool. That's a self-oscillating filter. We also have an amount that generally means oversampling. I don't recall reading about this at all in the manual. It may or may not be in there. I just don't remember. And we have a frequency control, so we can go ahead and filter our sound. So let's use something that's we've got our saw wave here. Let's play a lower saw wave. And you can hear it doing its job. It's bringing the level down. And yeah, watch the resonance. Because the resonance can be brought up so much, you want to be careful. It's really interesting to me. This is called the response. When I think of like filter response, I think of like topology. But anyways, that is pretty dang cool. So that's basic routing inside of XILS Lab. We haven't gotten to everything, but I'm gonna break this up into sort of a separate video just because one's been kind of long. Go ahead, try out many of the tricks you've seen here. I also want to show you one last one. You might be wondering, what is the deal with this input effects? And that's because XILS Lab has an effects module. So if I come in here and insert XILS Lab into the chain as the effects version, so we have an effects version, and give it a sec, there it is. Okay, and let's just go ahead and clear it. Why is it small? I didn't want the small one. Let's change the display. See, it's handy because I want to see all three panels. So let's clear that, delete this, open it one more time. I guess a quick refresher on how to do this. So we have our effects, spectacular. So now I want to just clear this. I'm going to clear it. If I play a sound on the synth over here, nothing comes in. That's because XILS Lab just stops it cold. You have to have the effects being routed out. So if you route those out, you can hear it. So you can use it as an effect module, and this is how you get the effects to come in. So we see here, there's actually an input effects 1 and 2. It's not left to right. So it's similar to the output, how we have out 1 and 2. They are separate stereo outputs. So these are stereo. And you might be thinking, well, input effects, how do I use the second output? Well, that depends on your DAW. If we come into FL, we can see we have input 1. So in here, you have an input, but we only have one input. This sometimes means that you have to have the VST3 version in FL. I know that it's important that you have the VST3 in order to get the additional inputs. I don't know if I had installed, I don't recall if I installed the VST3 version. Just a sec, let's check. Yeah, so I only have VST, just regular VST setup. So I'm not exactly sure how to take advantage of the second input, but I can verify that what I'm saying is correct, because if I have my input and I route input 1, so this is insert 1, right? So we should only hear one note. We shouldn't hear the harmony. And if I hit play, so it's playing, and I route it, we can hear it. But the thing is, we can also hear it coming out input 2. So I'm not 100% sure on how to take advantage of the second input. To me, that's not a super important thing. I know how to get a channel of information into there, and I can work with a channel, no problem. But yeah, it's just a little thing. So maybe if you know, drop it down in the comments. And that is where we're gonna stop for today. Pretty powerful thing right here. Get familiar with it, get comfy, make some crazy patches, look through some presets, see how they routed things up. We'll talk about the stick controls down here. That's actually a reference to this guy right here. And also the extended matrix with the additional options that we are given. If you have any questions, again, drop them in the comments, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and have a blessed day.